I'm a retired school teacher. I taught for 34 years. I retired in 2009 so that I could pursue my passion full-time. I've been carving for the last 33 years, and so I bought a knife and a block of wood, and my first carving was a boot, and I finished it on December 13th of 1983. And you could say I was hooked. It effectively changed my life, and I became more absorbed in it, and I found that it was my passion. And what I find very amusing is that my wife's maiden name is Wood. Somewhere in the last 33 years, I've carved probably close to 2,000 pieces, both small and large. People come to me and they have an idea. I try to bring that to life. I enjoy the process. They enjoy watching me, and then they get to share that with all of their friends and neighbors. We checked out companies that did siding for houses, and Suburban Construction was top rated. And I had talked to a neighbor, they had some work done by them, and they were extremely pleased. We contacted them, and I had JR come over, and when he was in the house, I showed him some of my carvings, and one thing led to another, and he said, "Could you do a carving of my dad?" I said, "Well, I don't see why not." I had a log out at my shop that was butternut that was quite large for that species of wood, and that species of wood in Iowa is becoming very rare because a blight has killed most of the butternut. And after that, powderpost beetle comes in and really decimates the wood. We decided on what kind of pose he wanted to see his dad in. He told me a little bit more about his dad. I got some pictures to work from. And over the winter, I spent the better part of 3 months doing this project. You try to determine the height of the individual and what their shoulder width is, because basically shoulder width will pretty much match the waist. Sometimes the waist is a little bit bigger. So you try to fit the person into the cylinder. I've drawn on the piece after I've done a little bit of blocking out. Clipboard here, the shoulder, the left shoulder's here, coming down to the elbow, and then the left hand comes out here. The tape measure here, the right shoulder coming down to the elbow and coming a little bit forward. He's going to have a pen in his hand. He's going to be wearing a long sleeve, kind of a dress shirt that's open at the top. I'll do a silhouette of the individual, front view, side view, and I will take off a lot of the extraneous wood that's there. Then you have to round things up. You have to move the arm around a little bit, so you're working on planes, and what I use there is my smaller saws and angle grinders. After that, I'll get out my mallet and chisel and do all the fine features. JR and I decided that we should have his dad look somewhat the way he did when he was running the business. His dad always wore a white button-down long sleeve shirt and khaki pants. He kind of let the rest of it up to me. His dad has a fairly long torso. He's about 6 feet tall, and I have a piece here that's just about right at 6 feet. I ran into an area that wasn't very stable. It was around his area of the left side of his neck and down into the collar. I had to put in some wood hardener, and I had to fill in some areas. The eye to the side of the nose down here, and then underneath here, this wood is very soft. It wants to pull. You can see a spot right here, it just came out. And so this part of the head and all that is fine, but I've had to really adjust my carving to these areas in here that are not the best wood. Also, when this piece dried down, a crack developed off of his vision, off of his left side. And so I had to cut some additional pieces and shim them in and then over carve it to match what was there.
You never quite know what you're going to run into. Well, right on after I had did some of the figure, I noticed in the face that there were some cracks and checks, and whenever you're carving, you put pressure on the wood. If you look at this crack goes under the nose and comes out in the forehead. When I move this piece in here, this whole section of the jaw is moving. Just barely, but it moves. So I'm going to not carve on this part anymore, and I will go ahead and get another piece of butternut, and I will go ahead and put a shim in here and let that dry and stabilize this piece, because if I go back in any further and lessen the thickness up in here under his nose, chance of it cracking might go way up. Because this is butternut, and it is notorious for having the powderpost beetle will just come in and decimate the wood. It will just start boring, and the grub gets in there and it eats away, lays a couple of eggs, population explodes, and before you know it, within 2 years' time, you'd have nothing but dust, fine sawdust.
I had to spray this log and let it set for a while with an insecticide so that it would kill most of these bugs. If you look at some of my logs when I get them, I try as soon as possible to get the bark off of them. This creates other problems. It causes a little faster checking and cracking with the wood, but it effectively diminishes by probably 90% the amount of insect infestation.
And when you're working on it, you're up close, you don't always see things so that you can standing away from it. So you're up close, you stop, get back, and you look at it, and you can see some of the things that need to be altered. Especially like in the face, the high point being the nose, and then the forehead. The forehead has to run back, and then everything else comes off to the side and back. And you have to keep working at it, revealing the base of the nose. When you're working with wood like this, you have to kind of go with what the wood allows you to do.
That piece grew 80, 90 years ago from a nut, and it was sitting on a bluff, and it was subjected to all kinds of weather and animals and birds and whatnot. And then somebody saw to harvest it. I got a hold of it, and it's a unique piece. It was once a living thing, and now it's going to kind of have a second life. I'm happy. I'm looking forward to having JR see it and have him present it to his dad. It's a special talent that I've developed, and I told my wife, I said, if tomorrow would come and I would never be able to do another carving, I would be thrilled to have been able to do all the things that I do. And so each time that I finish a piece, have something come together and people enjoy it, that gives me a real sense of enjoyment and satisfaction that I'm ready to turn around and start another project and do the same thing for somebody else. So I have a lot of fun. It's work sometimes, it's messy sometimes, but it's all worth it in the end.